Welcome to the Navigator podcast. Our guest today is Julia Baillie, founder of CommuniQuest Consulting, a communication, content creation, and marketing agency focused on the pro AV and tech industries. Her experience in this space includes working with manufacturers, systems integrators, distributors, software vendors, and investors. Prior to launching CommuniQuest, Julie was a partner and director of research at Aclaro Growth Partners. Aclaro specializes in market due diligence for mid-market private equity M&As. Julie led Aclaro's AV and ICT practice, in addition to producing the only market research report of their kind for Infocom. Julia is invaluable in branding efforts for a number of systems integration and related companies, including Navigate Management Consulting and Solutions 360. She has conducted extensive research on the impacts of company culture, on the company's brand, and its ultimate success, whether that be revenue, profitability, customer and employee retention, etc. Wow, Julie, that was a great intro.
Well, thank you.
Experience just speaks to that, right? So thanks for participating in this podcast, really supporting the Navigate Academy Module 22, which is bring your brand to the front line. And I think you're the expert to help us discuss that. From your just practical experience and your research activities, what's the impact of a company's culture on its brand?
Well, the two are completely intertwined. Like our tagline for the module says, your culture is your brand. So you really can't separate the two. It's like the water we're all swimming in. How do you describe the water? And that's where I find really vision and mission come into play. And we talked about that quite a bit in the webinar for the module. It's so important to have a vision statement or a mission statement because that's how you verbalize your culture and your brand. If I take a look at Navigate, our mission statement is that we help systems integration and related technology companies achieve better business results. When you come to our website, it's the very first thing you see. So at one glance, people know, oh, that's what those guys are all about.
Right.
And I love that mission statement. You know, it gives me purpose. It gives me meaning. I love coming to work and helping people every day. I think you do too.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And there's been a real departure. If you take a look at mission statements and vision statements from years ago, they had a lot more of a tone about we want to be the biggest, or we want to be the best, or we want to be the most respected. And that doesn't really ring true. It's a little self-serving and it's a little bit hollow to people today. So I really think people need to go back and take a look at their vision statements on a regular basis. And that's something that you should always be updating, and it should always reflect your culture and your brand.
Right. It's a lot of like, why are we here for others? Versus just why are we here for ourselves? We can only succeed through others.
That's right. Yeah. Well, our goal should really be to create a culture that inspires people to give all they have to give simply because they love where they work. And that's certainly how I feel with all the companies that I work with. I love helping you.
So can you give me some examples of how companies truly mesh the two kind of aspects of culture and brand?
Yeah. I was just watching on the weekend a video that you mentioned to me, that Monty Python sketch, Who Sold You This Then? And it's all about John Cleese. He's the lone technician out in the field. And with one single sentence, he can undo months of precious selling. And he's unbeatable. He's lost his company 214 customers. And that's really an example of what you don't want. It's a hilarious sketch. Check it out if you want. Who Sold You This Then? You'll get a real laugh out of it if you work in the integration industry, especially if you're a tech, because it just shows how alone you can feel if you're out in the field and people don't have your back. That's the exact thing that you don't want to have. And I also want to say that, customers, they'll never love a company or a brand if the employees don't love it first. So when I take a look at companies who has done this well, Costco is one that really stands out to me. Their whole philosophy is that you serve the people, your employees, they'll serve the customer, who will ultimately drive business, and that will benefit all the stakeholders. And in that order, if you don't serve the employees first, then the rest of that domino effect isn't going to happen. And Costco just did a fantastic job of this. They started in 1983. They defied all of the conventional wisdom of retail, especially warehouse. James Sinegal, their co-founder, knew that it just wasn't right to keep wages at the lowest. So he paid his employees $20 an hour. And that was when the minimum wage was $7.25. He gave health care to 90% of his employees. Companies subsidized health care. And you know what happened? They have some really low turnover, less than 10%, which is phenomenal for hourly employees. And people go there because they feel like they belong. They know they have a future. And that is in complete contrast to a company like Walmart, where people just go there because it's a job and they need a paycheck.
But where do you see missteps or disconnects? And then what might be some warning signs?
Well, right now, it's very sad that people are very unhappy at work right now. The US Labor Department says that 4 million people quit their jobs in April, 3.6 million people quit their jobs in May. The Deloitte Shift Index says that 80% of Americans are dissatisfied with their jobs. And they're calling it the Great Resignation, but really it's the Great Discontent. People are unengaged and they're not happy at work. They don't feel like they belong to a team. And this is especially true for millennials. And I saw some other research from Gallup. The latest analysis says that 48% of employees are actively looking for a new job. So when half of all American employees are looking for a new job and 80% of them are unhappy at work, it really reminds me of our diagram of the culture stairway to hell. You know, people don't trust each other. There's a lot of negative interactions in the workplace. There's disloyalty. And you really want to be able to turn that around to the culture stairway to heaven. And to do that, you need to have positive interactions with the people that you work with. They have to be authentic. There needs to be credibility. You need to build trust. There needs to be consistency and loyalty. We'll put that diagram in our resource library just for people to take a look at, but it would be interesting for everybody to take a look and see, you know, where does your company fit on that stairway and what can you do to turn it around? Because the change ultimately begins with you. You have to be the change. You can only change yourself. You can't change anyone else.
Well, and I think when we say like the stairway and credibility and loyalty, it's really loyalty to the vision, loyalty to standards. I think a lot of people these days confuse that with coddling, or confuse happy with, well, nobody's irritated. Well, no, like you said, it's a culture of resignation. And people are just checking out because their heart's not in it, and their soul's not in it. And that really, as you said, it starts with the leaders. If they're there, lead by example. And again, it's just an uphill spiral. You talked about millennials a little bit. Where do you see their intersection in terms of culture, brand? And again, they're different from me. So what do I need to know about them?
Well, that is where our book of the month comes in for the Navigate Book Club. Brad, did you know we have a book club at Navigate?
We do, yes.
And did you know we actually read the books in the book club?
I read every book that's up there. Yes, I do. Thank you.
So we picked this one because Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last, really highlights this situation with the millennials and the dissatisfaction. Now I'm reading a newly revised version, and he did a lot of extra research with millennials and their employers to investigate this very issue. Why are millennials unhappy at work, and what do their employers have to say? So he describes the millennials that he interviewed as they're very idealistic, they're optimistic, they're driven, they want to do good in the world. And all of these are very noble causes. They also describe their bosses as they're not giving them enough support and they're not giving them enough direction. So he had discussions with them, and they would go something along the lines of this. Well, I'm not happy at work and I'm thinking of quitting. Well, why are you going to do that? Well, I'm not making an impact. Well, you've only been here for about 6 months. What kind of an impact do you think you're going to make? But rather than questioning their expectations and thinking, is this in line, they quit and they go on to the next job, and then they can't figure out why they're unhappy there. It's like they're sitting at the bottom of this mountain called impact, and they're looking at the top, and they don't know how to get there, and they think the job is the problem. On the flip side, the experience of the employers is completely different. Now, they say their millennial employees are often impatient, that they're entitled, they can't handle criticism or any kind of feedback at all, and they often make unreasonable demands. So I would say that's a huge disconnect.
Yep.
How do we get here? I mean, this is everywhere Simon Sinek goes, he gets the millennial question, he calls it. So this isn't just kids are kids. This is something that really is seriously impacting the generation. So Sinek talks in the book about there's 3 dominant factors that he thinks contributes to this in general. And none of this is meant to point fingers at any of the millennials at all. This only seeks to understand their dissatisfaction and how to turn that around, and so that they can be satisfied. So he thinks in general, and these are his words, not mine, they've been overparented. They're suffering from ubiquitous technology. They're the first generation where technology has been everywhere. We didn't grow up with that. We're Gen X. And they've had greater opportunities for instant gratification. They were the first generation to grow up with the internet. And, we also never had that. So these 3 impacts are kind of the perfect storm in creating that impatience that you often sense from millennials. There's another book, Julie Lithcott-Haynes. She's a Stanford dean, and it's called How to Raise an Adult. And she describes in a very uncomfortable picture seeing students on campus that are so paralyzed from overparenting that they have troubles making decisions on their own. They have troubles paying their own bills. They're uncertain how to handle conflict and setbacks. So they're graduating and entering the workforce having not learned these skills. So the real opportunity is for leadership and for employers to fill that gap. And I think that's where it comes from. These millennials are saying they don't feel like they're getting enough support, and they don't feel like they're being given enough direction in the workplace. It's because they've had that guidance and that kind of hand-holding all the way along, and they continue to need that in the workplace. But the boomer leaders, even Gen X leaders, we never had that kind of leadership. We never needed that kind of leadership. So it takes a lot of empathy, and that's what we need to do. We need to put ourselves in each other's shoes. And that's one thing Simon Sinek is so good at in the book, is putting you in the other person's shoes. He writes with so much empathy. And so I highly recommend our book of the club. And if you read it, I would love to hear what you think about it.
Awesome. Well, and I think that's where we'll start, is just, again, we read every book, but what's a key place that companies should start, or leaders should start, to really enhance or embrace this connection between brand and culture?
Well, I want to go to Sinek's circle of safety. And really, the circle of safety makes people feel like they are more than an expendable resource. Inside the circle of safety, we feel like we belong. And that feeling of belonging and safety is what people are longing for. And that'll help you get behind the vision and the mission, so that everybody's on the same page and working together. People in general, especially millennials, have no loyalty to a company that only offers them money and benefits. And that is apparent more than ever. Might not have been that way 20 years ago. It certainly is that way today. And it all starts with the leaders. Like you said, it starts at the top. So goes the leader, so goes the culture, so goes the culture, so goes the company.
Well, I know we just talked about a book. Is there any other book that you're excited about?
I haven't quite finished this one yet. I'm still reading it. I've got about 50 pages left. So as soon as I finish this one, I'll go on to the next. I'll read our book of the month for next month.
Thank you, Julia. I appreciate it. And as always, you get the energy flowing, and you help me be my brand. So I appreciate it.
Well, it's a real pleasure.